What's going down, everybody? Welcome back to another CAD Pop Patreon Deck Tech. This week, mono green Spellslingers. Let's hit it right now. Alright, we're back. The first CAD Pop Patreon Deck Tech of 2021. This one, Wart the Raid Mother Mono Green Spellslinger. Don't forget, the CAD Pop Deck Techs are brought to you by FusionGamingOnline.com, your source for all your gaming needs, all your deck tech needs, all your Wart the Raid Mother needs. And this deck, submitted by Patreon supporter Anthony Bockley over at patreon.com/CADPopcast. Ton of great benefits. Anthony's altered art Wart the Raid Mother is going to be featured in the video at a discounted rate. The CAD Pop Patreon Discord server, the altar of the day over at CADPopcast on Twitter, and of course, most importantly, my unending thanks. All great benefits to becoming a Patreon supporter. Last thing before we get to the deck. Remember, the CAD Pop Deck Techs are for three groups of people, primarily. We've got the new players, new to the format, new to Magic, doesn't matter. The people that are looking to build their first decks. We're focusing on sound deck building principles, and we want to outline why certain cards are in the deck and how they help the deck function. The second group of people, the more established players, I'll call them, the players that are looking to maybe build outside of their comfort zone, build their second deck, refine an edge, become better. I think that this deck really will speak to that group of people because this deck is kind of an established archetype in the Spellslinger archetype, a type of deck that doesn't play a ton of creatures, but what's cool, what might put you out of your comfort zone if you've already done that, is this is a mono green list. It's going to play a little bit different, it's going to protect itself a little bit different, and it's going to win the game in a little bit of a different way. And then the final group of people are the long time people. Maybe you're looking to build around a pet card, maybe you're looking for some nostalgia factor from an old standard or modern format gone by that you loved a card from that you want to build around. This deck probably will also speak to those people because mono green isn't the typical Spellslinger color, and maybe that group of people, the longtime player, is looking to do something really different, something they've never seen before out in the wild. So this is going to be great. Last thing before we hit the deck. We mentioned it was a Wart the Raid Mother deck. It is going to be all green, but we're going to read the commander and we're going to put a little asterisk beside it. This is a 3/3 Goblin Shaman for Gruul Hybrid 4. When Wart the Raid Mother enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 red and green Goblin Warrior creature tokens. And each red and green instant or sorcery spell we cast has Conspire. And what that means is as you cast the spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share a color with the spell. When you do, copy that spell. Couple things on Conspire, and we did cover this in the, I believe it was the Shadowmoor set retrospective or technical section where Conspire was originally printed. I think it was Shadowmoor, if memory serves me correctly. When you cast a green instant or sorcery, we can tap green creatures because remember, everything is green in this deck. When we do, we copy the spell. Okay, whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell in this deck, because they're all green and all our creatures are green, and Wart the Raid Mother's on the battlefield, we can tap 2 creatures, Wart or otherwise, and copy the spell. So we get 2 of everything that we're going to cast. That all being said, let's hit up the deck. Let's get right to it. Let's jump in. Custom categories, very appreciated in the deck tech industry. If you've got custom categories that are going to help anybody understand the deck. Let's get some of the nuts and bolts out of the way. We've got some ramp, we've got some removal, some card draw. Let's get that out of the way so we know it's there, so we can see what the deck actually does and how it wants to win. So, ramp. 17 pieces of ramp, almost double what a traditional commander deck would have if a traditional deck is aiming between like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pieces of ramp. No, this one, 17. We've got Sol Ring and Emerald Medallion as the 2 artifacts. Then Baduka Gardener, Edge of Autumn, Gaia's Touch, Lotus Cobra, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, Sakura Tribe Elder in the 2-drop slot. In the 3-drop slot, we've got Cultivate, Far Wandering, Harrow, Nisa's Pilgrimage, and sort of Beanstalk Giant. Of course, we're looking at the sorcery, adventure, search your library for a basic land card put onto the battlefield portion of Beanstalk Giant, where later we can pay 7 and get a giant creature with power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control. It's going to serve 2 functions. We're definitely going to be able to take advantage of the 7-drop actual giant creature, and it's going to be huge. 7/7, 8/8, 10/10, what have you. Moving up the chain, we've got an Into the Wilds. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you can put it onto the battlefield. That's kind of cool. A Sky Shroud claim that lets us find 2 forests, put them into the battlefield untapped. And then at the 5-drop slot, we've got a Freyalise Llanowar Emissary, which +2s to give us essentially a Llanowar elf, an elf druid that taps for a green mana. Of note, you can -2 her as soon as she comes in, and she can remove target artifact or enchantment, so kind of fits into the removal section, but at 5 mana, I'm not sure she fits into either section. But since this deck seems to want to go long game, I think it's a fine pick. If this deck was trying to break some land speed record and go really fast and combo to get mana, I don't think Freyalise would fit. But since this deck wants to control, stave off any potential attackers, the best thing it can do is continuously build more mana than it should, turn over turn, and Freyalise does let the deck do this. I mentioned removal, let's get right to it. We've got Beast Within, Gleeful Sabotage, Return to Nature, which is an upgrade over just traditional Naturalize. If you're still running Naturalize, Return to Nature actually gives you a 3rd option to exile target card from a graveyard. I would play that before a Naturalize. We've got a Scavenging Ooze, which lets us exile a card from a graveyard again. This is an important function to have. Graveyard hate is important, and it should be counted as removal when it's spot-like Scavenging Ooze lets us do. Song of the Dryads takes care of anything, makes it a forest, so great to hit somebody's commander with. Unravel the Ether shuffles an artifact or enchantment back into its owner's hand. So if you've got something that's got like Indestructible, for example, this will shuffle it back into somebody's library. Finally, Wave of Vitriol. This is a big one. Green, 5 sorcery. Each player sacrifices all artifacts, enchantments, and non-basic lands they control. For each land sacrifice this way, its controller searches their library for a basic, puts it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffles. It's going to punish people that are ramping with mana rocks. It's going to punish people who are playing more non-basics in their deck than they are basics, because they're not going to be able to find enough to replace all the lands that were destroyed or sacrificed. That's a great card. And just hold on for it, wait for it, please. The 7 mana cost does make this card a removal card in this deck, because this deck is going to want to take advantage, make big mana and then take advantage of big mana. Our next category though, card draw. We got 5 cards. We got Collective Unconscious, that's draw a card for each creature you control. Harmonize, just draw 3 cards. Seer Sundial, when a land enters the battlefield, you can pay 2 if you do draw a card. Shamanic Revelation, draw a card for each creature you control. And then a bunch of life gain if you have creatures with power 4 or greater, which is great. And Slate of Ancestry. 4, tap, discard your hand, draw a card for each creature you control. So we're going to want to make creatures too, it sounds like. Let's take a look at a couple of those ways and start to understand how the deck mixes in having all those land with all the creatures that it wants. The first one is Avenger of Zendikar. Format classic, staple, enters the battlefield, you get a 0/1 plant for each land you control. Probably what that means is you're going to get 7 dudes. Landfall, all your plants get +1/+1. Great. That's going to give us most likely 8 bodies for 7 mana when we cast that. Beacon of Creation puts a 1/1 green insect creature token onto the battlefield for each forest we control for 4 mana. And that goes alongside Howl of the Night Pack greatly, because that gives us a 2/2 wolf creature token for each forest we control, which is basically all of our lands. In a similar vein, Rampaging Baloth, 6/6 for 6, landfall gives us another 4/4. And brand new card making a splash in the format, Scoot Swarm. A 1/1 for 3, landfall, create a 1/1 green insect token, but if we have 6 or more lands, you create a copy of Scoot Swarm. You copy it and copy it and copy it and copy it. It grows exponential because the first one makes 2, those 2 make 4, those 4 make 8, those 8 make 16. Gets huger and huger and huger. These are all in our land synergy section, alongside Courser of Krufix, which lets us play the top card of our library if it's a land, but also landfall gain 1 life. That's going to be important in a minute. In a similar vein, Retreat to Kazandu. Landfall, put a +1 counter on target creature. I don't know if we're going to need that, but landfall, gain 2 life. This might be important. Other land synergies include Nissa, who shakes the world. All your forests add an additional green when they tap, and you can plus her to give +1 counters. We don't care. We want to pay 5 mana and double our forests. And finally, Wilderness Reclamation. At the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. Great, because we've got some instant speed interaction, and even more important because if we have any of the creatures that we've mentioned, or Wart, or the 2 goblins that she brings, we always have mana up for the instant speed cards that we can copy with Conspire. Very important stuff. Now, before we get to any of the big stuff that we want to be dumping our mana into, I want to first take a quick look at the creature buffs that we're going to bolster our creature suite that I just talked about with, and then some recursion. Then we'll look at some pretty hefty mana dumps. As far as buffs go, we've got a Samut Tyrant Smasher. Now, this is another Gruul Hybrid 2 type card, but we're only ever going to pay green with it, and we can play this because Wart actually has Gruul in her casting cost too, her color identity. So creatures gain haste, and you can -1 this Samut to give target creature +1/+2 and gain haste until end of turn, scry 1. That's a loyalty of 5 when it comes in, and you just only ever have the option to minus it. But the point is, let's say with that Avenger of Zendikar, if we play it, and then we drop another 2 lands off of a Skyshroud Claim or something, and then all of our plant tokens are all 2/3s or what have you, Samut's going to give them all haste, which is pretty cool. We've got Elder of Laurels. This is a 2/3 for 3. You can pay green 3. Target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So same example. Let's say we've got Avenger of Zendikar and 7 plants. We're getting ready to attack. We pay 4. Avenger of Zendikar is going to get +8/+8. So now it'll be the 13/13. Then we can pay 4 again because we're going to have 8 mana the turn after we cast Avenger, probably. We're going to give another plant +8/+8. And if we landfalled, since our Avenger came onto the battlefield, that plant would have already gotten +1/+1. So it'll be like a 9/10 when it attacks the next turn. 9/13, we're going to be attacking for 22 damage. That is really good. Craterhoof Behemoth, of course, classic finisher, classic buff for 8 mana, enters the battlefield, gives +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures you control. Elder of Laurels, but for everybody. Crashing Drawbridge, creatures you control gain haste just by tapping it. That's a 0/4 artifact. And Beru Fist of Krosa. Whenever a forest enters the battlefield, green creatures we control get +1 and gain trample until end of turn. Powerful card in any kind of landfall, land shenanigans deck, because that random Skyshroud Claim plus a land drop for your turn turns into a giant growth for your whole team. Nothing to sneeze at. Just quick, we've got Wildest Dreams that gets X cards back from your graveyard. We've got a Reap, which gets cards back from your graveyard for each black permanent an opponent controls. I've used this card to great effect in Atraxable in Magic Fest Las Vegas 2018. Great card. And then a Balaged Recovery, which is a green land on the backside, but on the front side, it's the return target card from your graveyard to your hand for 3 mana. So this is essentially Eternal Witness that has the benefit to be a land on the backside if you don't need the recursion. All right, we've talked about the big mana, doubling mana, finding the mana, the big creatures that we can accelerate to, let's say, mid-game. Where do we want to be, though, late game? How does this deck win? Let's take a look at our 7 mana dumps. First one, Ant Queen, a 5/5 for 5, but we can pay 2 to get an insect creature token onto the battlefield. So if we've got 20 mana, all of a sudden that's 10 dudes. Finale of Devastation. Again, remember, we got 20 mana. Green X, search your library and your graveyard for a creature with converted mana cost X or less put onto the battlefield. If X is 10 or more, creatures you control get +X/+X and gain haste. So we just dump a whole ton into this. We find a Craterhoof. Craterhoof's going to enter the battlefield just for free off of Finale. It's going to give everybody ++, and then Finale is going to give everybody +10 more minimum. That is going to be a game ender. we've got a Gelatinous Genesis. Green XX, you put X, XX, green ooze creature tokens onto the battlefield. If we've got, let's say, 21 mana, green, X equals 10, X equals 10, we're going to get 10 10s. That's going to end games if they all have haste with your Samut, for example. Or, if we conspire that, we're copying a spell with X in its casting cost while it's on the stack. Because remember, conspire functions when the spell is on the stack. So when we copy it, it's going to see the value of X when the spell's on the stack. It's not like we're going to get 20 20s, but we are going to get, instead of 10 10 10s, we're going to get 20 10 10s. Pretty awesome. Green Sun Zenith operates just like Finale, except without the pump, so we could just find our Crater Hoof, put it directly onto the battlefield. Nemata Grove Guardian does the same thing as Ant Queen, except for Saprolings, and then we can sacrifice Saprolings to give all other Saprolings +1/+1. So for example, if we had 10 Saprolings and we sacrificed 5 of them, the remaining 5 would all get +5/+5, and we'd swing in for 25. Waker of the Wilds allows us to pay green X to make a land into a creature and then put X +1/+1 counters on it. So if we just go like green, X equals 1, X equals 1, X equals 1, X equals 1 a whole bunch of times, and then we do a Crater Hoof, it's going to see that many more lands as creatures to make everything else so much bigger. And remember, the lands get haste. Finally, our big X mana dump creature maker, I'm going to call them, is going to be Worm Calling. This is X green. I've never even heard of this card. Put an XX green worm creature token onto the battlefield, but it's got buyback of green 2. When you cast the spell, you can pay an additional green 2. If you do, you put it back into your hand when it resolves instead of into your graveyard. That's going to let us get it back, cast it again, get it back, cast it again. We just got to do the math on like how many times we can do it if we always want to pay the extra 3 to get it back. In mid-game, this is fine because we can just go like X equals 2 or 3 as a blocker and like pay the 3 to get it back for later. And that's a really bad rate for a 2/2 or a 3/3. But in a pinch, when all we need is a blocker to stay alive one more turn or negate one attack, that's fine. And the reason it's fine is because we've got some spells here, some direct damagers that are going to really be the icing on the cake, the cherry on top. And we're going to take a look at Hurricane, Squall Line, and Squall Monger. All of those essentially are Hurricane variants that say all players and flying creatures take X damage. Hurricane does that. Squall Line does that at instant speed for an additional green. And then Squall Monger is a creature that does that upon an activated ability of 2. It's a 3/3 for 4, then you can pay 2 and it deals 1 damage to each creature without or with flying and each player. The key about that one is any player can pay that activated cost. And the extra cool thing about it is Squall Monger doesn't have flying, so it'll never die to that ability. That's a great one. And remember, we're going to have 20 mana. We're going to have 40 mana. And remember, those couple cards that gave us that little tiny little instance of life gain. Retreat to Kazandu, landfall, gain 2 life. Courser of Crewfix, landfall, gain a life. So excellent. So excellent. Now, a couple more things. We've got a Stormseeker. That's an instant that deals 1 damage to target player for each card in their hand. That's going to punish players that like to draw a go or draw a whole ton and just play Magic generally with like 6, 7, 8 cards in their hand. And remember, if we can copy that Stormseeker, it's going to do 12, 14, 16 damage to that player. And what's really great, and I imagine this being like one of those magical Christmas land like dream plays in the deck, is you go like Stormseeker, copy it, hit you for 16, Balaged Recovery, Stormseeker back to my hand, Stormseeker, copy it, hit you for 16 again, kill you. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about here. Awesome when you can double stuff like that and just 16 you. You thought being at 32, 34, 38 life that you were going to be okay, right? I love this kind of thing. It's very atypical to see a green deck do Spellslinger stuff like that. Like if you're thinking Storm, Burn, and Earthquake, and something like Torbrand, and the tripling and the doubling of damage in red, that's traditionally what people think of when they talk about or play a Spellslinger deck. And we're doing the same thing here. We're casting a Hurricane instead of an Earthquake, and those are kind of 2 sister cards. But instead of doubling damage, like red can do, we're using something like Nissa Who Shakes the World to double our mana. That's something that is a very green thing to do. It's great. That's why this deck probably speaks to people that are looking to go outside their comfort zone, build something new, or the long-time players that have seen that red deck 58 times last week and want to build the green version of it. We've got one extra category here before we wrap up, and that's the, air quotes, the flex category, right? We've got a bind, which counters an activated ability and draws you a card. An Essence Warden, which, again, gains us life whenever a creature ETBs anybody's creature, including, 20 of ours, and that'll put us out of our own hurricane range. Heroic Intervention gives our creatures hexproof and indestructible. Joyous Respite, this is a Kamigawa common. Green 3 sorcery. You gain 1 life for each land you control. Like, what? Anthony would be ultra trolling us if he swapped this out and put a stream of life in. Green X, gain X life at sorcery speed. Finally, last card in the deck, Sandworm Convergence. Green 6 enchantment. Creatures with flying can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. That's an additional kind of thorn in the side to go along with that hurricane. And at the beginning of your end step, create a 5/5 green worm creature token. Just another token maker, another creature maker, another thing at 8 mana that we don't care that it's 8 mana. Love it. Very much reminds me of my Enchantress deck that makes big mana, Estrade untaps the enchantments. I win with Hurricane, Squall Line, Squallmonger. I hope in some way, shape, or form through Commander Ad Populum, I inspired Anthony with that, and that's why he's doing this. I hope that. But I can't take credit, especially because the whole deck is mono green and it is a Spellslinger deck and you are copying spells in non-red and non-blue colors. Love it. Don't forget, if you want to pick up any of the cards from this deck, you can do so over at FusionGamingOnline.com. They're your source for all your CAD Pop Decktech needs, mono green Spellslinger or otherwise. And if you want to have your deck featured on the show, the podcast, or the YouTube channel, head on over to patreon.com/CADPopcast. Find the appropriate tier to pledge at and submit your deck. It's that easy. You can submit multiples. This is actually Anthony's second deck. I think he's the first patron to have 2 decks featured, and I wanted to get this one in because I love the deck. I love when there's off the beaten path type scenarios like this deck can represent, and it does play a lot of pet cards for me, like the Nomada Grove Guardian, for example. So Anthony, huge thanks for sending the deck in. I hope you like your Altered Wart. I assume it's going in this deck. For everybody else out there on YouTube, thank you for watching this long. Watch it right to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Share Commander Ad Populum podcast or YouTube page, whichever is your preference. At CAD Popcast on Twitter, Commander Ad Populum on Facebook. Don't forget to check out the socials there. You can like and follow for the altar of the day and general channel content updates. And for everybody checking out the next episode of Commander Ad Populum podcast, I will see you next Wednesday.